Yo, what it do, Chicken Stew family? Is the coppercoloredking. We back in this bad boy with some more good content. And today I got another banger for the folks, man. We're going to be putting out some real good information. Debunking some shit, man. We're going to debunk something today. We're going to make this one nice and quick, too. I'm going to try to pull out as much information from the articles I have to further, like I said, debunk the bull crap that be coming out of these media men mouths sometimes, man. So we got an article from July 23rd, 2025 that pretty much states or talks about the Muscogee Creek Nation and how the descendants of the former slaves from the nation are now being granted citizenship. Right? In other terms, it's like saying the black folks who claim to be Creek or claim to be Muscogee or claim to be a part of that branch of people, that linguistic stock of people, can now obtain some type of benefits due to some type of connection there being one that stems from slavery, right? Of course, they're going to tell us that the black folks are slaves, right? Descendants of slaves. But how true is that? See, I love when they do this stuff right here because this is why we read, right? We read and we gain as much information as we possibly could because we get to hear a lot of these perspectives out of the books, technically the mouths of these authors who wrote these books in 1800s. So the media men of that time have a totally different perception of these situations than the media men of this time. Why is that? Why is that? Right? The media men of that time never referred to the descendants of the Creek Nation as slaves. These people were Creeks. As a matter of fact, the media men even told us that a lot of these folks didn't have any forms of slavery that was similar to their European counterparts. You dig? On top of that, the very first Muscogee Creek peoples that they encountered were black. They were colored. Right, so we're going to go into the article. Right. Matter of fact, before we even go into the article, I kind of wanted to save it. Matter of fact, yeah, we're going to go into the article. We're going to save it, right? So, published by Dale Denwalt. This is by the Oklahoman, right? Oklahoma newspaper, I'm assuming. And it states that the Muscogee Nation has been ordered by its highest court to recognize descendants of the tribe's former slaves as tribal citizens. Right? It's 2025. Right? Some of these freedmen are no longer even alive. Right? They're descendants, some of who probably don't even care, for the exception of those who are fighting for that status. But a lot of the young folks don't even know, right? The information is not out there for them to learn. You know, the disconnect is real. It says, the Muscogee Creek Nation Supreme Court agreed with two freedmen descendants, Rhonda Grayson and Jeffrey Kennedy, that the tribe should grant them citizenship. The court also directed the Tribal Nation Citizenship Board to issue citizenship to any applicant who can prove lineage to people listed on the 1906 Creek Freedmen Dawes Rolls. For those people who are interested, get to researching. Because your family, a lot of our family members was on these rolls. I know I found it myself. So get to researching. Right? For descendants of slaves who were held by tribal members or who lived within the Muscogee Reservation after slavery was abolished, right? After these people, they were carried along during the Trail of Tears, forced into slavery before the Trail of Tears, were slaves on the Trail of Tears, right? They lived there because they traveled there right along with these folks. See, people got to understand is before slavery was abolished, they had just finished the forced relocation, the intermarrying and mixing of the peoples, banding them up together, dropping them off in one spot. At this time, a lot of these people have new tribal identities, right? Ones that are so far away from the ones that their family members had hundreds and 200s of years ago. right? When they first got here, that was the 1500s. All of this stuff ended in the 1800s. So that was 300 years of moving around, forced relocation, right? Ancestors being shifted about. You may have been from America but found yourself in Europe, or found yourself in Africa or the Caribbean because of slavery. You may be in vice versa, right? We all know that there was a Caribbean island to the American mainland slave trade. There was a slave trade between Europe and the American mainland, right? People were being moved around. So by the time slavery was abolished, you already had these bands of tribes of people who may have identified with different groups and linguistic stocks based off the blood. But they chose to stick together and be a part of that nation because that's how they were to survive at that point. Those people would be identified as Creeks, but we all know Creek is a makeup of many different tribes, and we're going to talk about that, right? I made a video about it, but we're going to make another mention of it as we dive into who the Muscogean language actually belongs to, what peoples, right? For the descendants of slaves who were held by tribal members or who lived within the Muscogee reservation after slavery was abolished, the court ruling on Wednesday, July 23rd is a long-awaited affirmation that they deserve the same rights and privileges of other tribal members. Right? Give us our land, right? Give us these paychecks, right? The same stuff you gave the real pretendians, we want it back for us. It belongs to us. I don't blame them, right? This decision could eventually lead to Muscogee citizenship for thousands of people, including some who have tried for decades to be recognized as Muscogee Creek citizens. As Creek Freedmen, we've always carried the truth of who we are, right? We've always carried the truth of who we are. Today, that truth was recognized, says Demario Solomon Simmons, the lead attorney who represented Grayson and Kennedy as their case worked its way through the Muscogee Nation court system for years. This decision affirms our place in the nation, not as outsiders, but as citizens. Solomon Simmons said in a statement, "We're ready to walk forward together, guided by our elders, our communities, and our shared hope for what comes next." Turn up, big bruh. Turn up, big bruh. Put it on. Right, where we at with it? And this is the attorney right here, this bald guy. We're going to listen to him speak too. Right, in a statement, the Muscogee Nation Principal Chief David Hill indicated he and other tribal officials may ask the Tribal Supreme Court to reconsider the decision. Right, we are currently reviewing the order to understand its basis as well as its implications for our process, Hill said. It may be necessary to ask for a reconsideration of this order to receive clarity so that we can ensure that we move forward in a legal constitutional matter. Right, what does identifying with your ancestors have to do with legalities, constitutions, and that's all American stuff. That's how you know this is all cap. Right, first off, where did reconsider come from? Right, they fighting for that citizenship. Now you reconsidering because what? You're gonna have to break bag. You're gonna have to break off some of that bag. You gotta pay folks. Right, all of these people that can actually come out and once they find that information, make that connection to these Muscogee Creek descendants. Right, they are scared. They are scared. They are scared because it's power in this land, man. Once you start being able to pull them strings outside of the government, that gives you a new, different type of power. Right? It's power in that. And these peoples don't want to see us back in power. They don't want to see those things fall back in place for us again. They'd rather keep you checkmate than to leave you on the chessboard, right? They want us to be the pawns when the whole shit dig belongs to us. Right? That's crazy. The tribal nation has a variety of programs to assist citizens. Those programs could see an influx of demand as a result of the ruling. The case hinged on how the court would interpret two key documents that disagreed about who gets to be a tribal citizen. The first is an 1866 treaty with the United States that abolished slavery in the tribe and granted rights to freedmen and their descendants. The second is the tribe's 1979 constitution that limits citizenship to only those who can trace their lineage back to enrolled Muscogee citizen by quote unquote by blood. Anybody was enrolling at that time, though. Right? You had multiple different peoples enrolling. People who don't even come from that state specifically enrolling. So what does that actually mean? Well, we could talk about it. They put the quotes on it by blood. Right? $5 Indians. Right? That's what we talking about. Them people who paid the $5 during the Dawes Rolls era to get put on that paperwork, falsely claiming that identity. Falsely claiming that identity. Oh, okay, I see why they put the quotes on it now. Because we got to understand, this Dawes Rolls, right, was created in 1898, 1914. This was to register people, to give out land allotments. White settlers and many non-native peoples put out bribes, and they obtained this blood citizenship, being enrolled back in this time. Fast forward, we got this segregation and everything. Black people having to be kept away. We don't got no land. We in poverty. We poor. Them land allotments would have set us free. Gave most folks a fighting chance. Right? But now we see it's 2025. And we're not even going to say something from 1979. It's something from 1898 that's still holding folks back. Or being able to connect back to what belongs to them. Because of that Dawes Rolls, right? That $5 Indian. Right? Ultimately, the Muscogee Nation Supreme Court ruled that the 1866 treaty is law. The treaty with the United States explicitly said that freed slaves and their descendants shall have and enjoy all the rights and privileges of native citizens, including an equal interest in the soil and natural funds. And the laws of the MCN shall be equally binding upon and give equal protection to all such persons. So what the hell happened? Right, the ruling landed 6 weeks after the court heard arguments. In the case, 2 of the Supreme Court's 7 justices rescued themselves and did not take part in the July 23rd decision. Muscogee Nation courts have ruled against freedmen in previous citizenship cases, and some descendants have been fighting for decades to obtain recognition. This includes Ron Graham, who has been trying to have his citizenship recognized by the MCN since 1983. Right? It is my identity, just as being American, Graham told the Oklahoman in 2023. I'm proud to be an American. I'm proud to be Creek. Right? Check this. They're going to give the biggest drop right here. We're going to connect some dots too. Well, it says chattel slavery became a part of Muscogee, Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, and Seminole societies as the practice spread with colonialization, right? As they adopted, or this European influence began to take sway over the people, you're now adopting this chattel slavery institution. But what people have to understand is that this chattel slavery that was adopted by these tribes were not something that they partook in as original peoples. There was no form of chattel slavery, especially at the time when they was trying to enslave folks amongst the nations. From the 1600s to the early 1800s, there was no chattel slavery amongst the Aboriginal tribes here in America. If there was any slavery going on, it was because folks mixed in and was trying to make businesses out of it. But other than that, slavery was another form of adoption, right? If you were captured, if you were a captive, right, if you wasn't too much on that, like the women and children, they were adopted into the nation. This is like what King Powhatan did for the Powhatan Confederacy. Once he subdued the pettier tribes and they all submitted to him, all of those people became family. He could have made them slaves, but he made them family. There's no chattel slavery amongst these people. Chattel slavery did not appear until the European gave them these names. Right? Until they started looking at Seminole as a tribe and not actually what it is for what it means. Or looking at Muscogee as a tribe and not what it is for what it means. Muscogee is a language. Seminole is a group of people. Chata, Chickasaw, pronounced like all of that is different. Even the names whitewash, something that we gotta understand. And there was no chattel slavery amongst these people though, and I'm gonna prove it, like I've proven it many other times before. So now we say with the Cherokee, they approved the new constitution in 2021 that extends full citizenship rights to freedmen. In 2022, the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs questioned representatives from each of the 5 tribes about the status of freedmen. All right, and then we end the article right there. So basically, folks been trying to get right, trying to obtain their status, right? But it's just so hard because of the wordplay and the treaties that were signed back in the day. Like, I'm gonna make a video on those too. There were treaties that were signed that these people didn't understand. They had no concept of owning land. And I spoke about this on previous videos. There was no concept of owning land. None. It was not, this is my land and we pay tax, you gonna pay us a tax to live here. It wasn't like that. Right? It wasn't like that. Right? The Europeans, when they got involved, a lot of this stuff changed, man. It changed. This is why we got the tax system now. A lot of the systems we have now are things that were introduced then. And not just countrywide, but in these colonies. The treaties took the land from the people. The treaties took product from the people, took the corn, helped kill the buffalo. Like, it's so much that these treaties resulted in because of a misunderstanding. And, I mean, sign it, still go to war. Now the war is forcing you off your land, and they tell you like, hey, if you fight for us against these people, we'll give you the land and the money. And once you fight, you don't really get that. Now you're being pushed more into poverty. More colonizers are coming, manifest destiny, Western expansion. People are just getting pushed all over the place. These folks going back to Europe, like talking about how they bullying niggas, when it ain't even like that either. Went through hell to take the land, man. I wish somebody please speak up about that, about how hard the original peoples had to fight just to maintain or preserve the little integrity that they were allowed to keep. That little bit of integrity which lies dormant in the majority of us. It's just up to us to wake up. Right? And check this out, right? This one right here is real interesting. We're going to read through this real quick, right? It's a short excerpt from an article. I got this from Pinterest. I was trying to find out where the person got the article for. I'm still doing my research, but as I was reading it, it just made more sense to me, right? Moors and Indians in South Carolina. Moors in South Carolina. It may not be generally known that some of the best families in South Carolina are Moors by descent. Right, some of the best families, these folks being the black and bougie slave owners of the South, right? Some of them. The blood of the African soon washes out, but that of the Indian and Moor, after half a score of generations, shows itself almost as strongly as ever. The crisp, curling black hair, dark sad eyes, long silken lashes, and swarthy complexion come up generation after generation. These are people who look like me, y'all. Mainly, many of the old Huguenot families down to the present day show strong traces of their Moorish descent. When the Moors were driven out from Spain upon the conquest of Granada, thousands of them took refuge in the south of France, carrying with them the art of cultivating the vine of growing silk. After the lapse of years, they were again driven to seek now new homes in large numbers, immigrating to South Carolina. This is most of our families. This is the ancestry of most Black Americans. And folks could G-check this, right? Y'all could go and G-check this. Just go check out the records. That's all you got to do. Take this information and do whatever you want with it. Let's continue. So yeah, like I said, man, we finna back all of this stuff up. Support what the brothers were saying and what they said in the article. You know, all of this freedmen stuff. You granting people citizenship because slave descendancy, like, doesn't make sense, man. Let's break it down real quick, right? So real quick, we are going to go into the book, The Indian Nations of South Carolina, and go to a specific part. Let's give you the title. Indians of the South Carolina Low Country from 1562 to 1751. A description of all of these peoples, what they would look like, the language they spoke, their ways and customs. Let's just jump right back into it real quick because we're going to debunk all of this slave stuff, man. Like, instead of just putting all of this stuff on paper and through constitution and courts and all of that, all people got to do is read. Is if we all just came together after educating ourselves and, you know, pushed forward a specific narrative, all it takes is for a certain amount of people to make a change. It's that easy, right? They playing with paperwork, right? Pen and paper, they playing with it in front of our face, right? Because there's people who know the truth, who do these readings, right? Whose ancestors even told them, like, this is the truth, this is what it is, right? And they'll, you know, there's many other people that's like that. So as soon as they see that, there's like a lot of folks like, yo, openly speaking on this stuff, like trying to make a change. We won't need no courts or anything like that to make a difference. Right. So the first point I'm about to prove, right? People like to say that Indians, right? Native Americans, they look like this, right? Every description I've read, especially for the Southeast, I don't get this. I don't get this. I don't get this. I don't get people who look like this. I don't get that. Promise you I don't. Promise you we don't get this. This foolery. Right? This buffoonery. That's what I call it. This buffoonery. Like this game of dress up. Of wear the costume. Who could wear the best costume? And make everybody look like clowns. Right? It's all costumes for these folks at the end of the day. They put more attention into the dressing up into actually understanding the ancestors. That's why they don't understand their ancestors. They don't know nothing about them. This what we talking about, dog. Right? This what we talking about. That's an engine. A real right engine. Y'all see that? Let's connect the dots. First things first. All right, so Indians of the South Carolina Low Country. Physical appearance. Right? Ashay's 1682 description. Right? He refers to the coastal Indians as of a deep chestnut color. Their hair black and straight. Their eyes black and sparkling. Little or no hair on their chins, well limbed and featured. It is not because they didn't grow hair on their faces, right? They shaved it off. They plucked it off. Right? They oil their skins and they can be butt naked in the sun. A black person characteristic off the rip. There ain't nobody that's pale like that gonna be able to stay in the sun too long, right? They gonna get burnt. That's just the reality. Right? In the 1707 Archdale description states that they are somewhat tawny. Right? We getting into description now. That's just the description of how they look. He's letting us know that these people are Negro. They are Negro. Right, what else we got? So again, I said I wanted to make mention of their language, right? Ways and customs as well. They didn't have a form of slavery. And that's just a point to be proven right then and there. Hold on, we're gonna get right into it. Let's get to the chapter now. Right, so boom, what we gonna go to? We gonna go to chapter 4. Probably page 26 or 27, like I said. So when we get into it, they let us know that a lot of the South Carolina tribes spoke a Muscogean dialect. Right? He proposes that the other language that was being spoken, the one at Santa Elena, was probably Muscogean. Right? There was plenty of Muscogean speaking tribes in the southeast. Right? Just to give folks some more, because we in the language chapter, they'll give us actually the Yamasee and the Creek or Muscogean language. Oh, Creek was a language. The Yamasee spoke Creek or Muscogean. Right? Yamasee also described as being of a deep chestnut color. Right? Shout out to Chiefs. Right? They outside. There's folks out there speaking on these things now. Yamasee is actually the same group of people who was rolling with the Seminoles. So if we're going to talk about it, like they all the same people. Real spill. They spoke Muscogean. All of these people described as being black. Right? The real Muscogean nation. The real tribes, them. Hold on, let's get some more. We could get some more. I'm pretty sure we could get some more. Who else spoke Muscogean? Right? Let's see. We got the Kiowa, who spoke Muscogean, the Guale and the Escamacu, who spoke Muscogean. They were actually multilingual, right? Multilingual. They spoke multiple languages. Guale spoke Escamacu. Escamacu spoke Guale. They all spoke Muscogean, right? You even had some Siouan language out there. Several tribes Muscogean, even though they were fighting against the Yamasee. Right? Mad different people speaking the same language. Right? All of these folks, the real Muscogee Nation. But to get down to the truth behind it all, really in reality, is we got to understand that Muscogee is not a tribe. That's number one. Right? So when they say Muscogee Creek Nation, what are you talking about? Because there was nobody in tribal history, from what I've been reading, that decided to say, hey, we're going to make Muscogee a nation. It wasn't created as a nation. Or they didn't band together as a nation. They speak the language. This is just what the white man considered it when he got there. And they abducted. There's nothing else to call them but Muscogee Creek. That's the language they speak. But y'all don't know them tribal names, though. Right? Let's just take a look. How many do we actually have? Right? Like, and I mentioned this in the older video. There's mad tribes, bro. There's so many different tribes. In South Carolina alone, I think it's about at least 20. Right? At least 20. Etowah, Stono, the Kiowa. All of these are islands in South Carolina. Folks, the Wimby, Combahee, Ashapu, Edisto. Who else? Santa Elena. The Santees. The Coosa. So many. They even had Cherokee out there. All of these people sharing that land. Right? And a good majority of them speaking Muscogean. So what would that say? What does that mean about, like, what does that say about the people who are truly their descendants, right? They're described as being black. They spoke this language. It's not like they banded together and said the language was a tribe. Who came up with that idea? Obviously, the people who came up with that idea, they had to be the same ones who came up with all of these rules and regulations that would sanction you to be a part of the tribe. Because if we're looking at it on a historical level, these same people are the same folks who became the slaves of the South. All right? That's the same people who became the slaves of the South. The same exact people. So real quick, we're going to go into another chapter just to debunk some more of their fuckery. Right? This slavery stuff. We got to understand. There was no form of slavery amongst these people. Right? And we learned this in their chapter on the war. How did they conduct themselves in times of war? Like, how did they step? What was going on? Because that's where slavery would start, right? Captives, POWs, right? These folks was going to war with one another before the Europeans got here. So whatever concept they had of slavery had to exist prior to the arrival of the European. And if it wasn't any similar slavery to what those of the Europeans brought over here, then how can you claim these descendants as slaves when the original folks didn't have no form of slavery? Right? Look. Right? We just going to go into it. Right? We're just going to go into it. So they talking about their war, how they conducted themselves during times of war. And what we learn is, and let me just get to this part. It says, slavery does not seem to have been a cause of war on the coast before a European market existed. There was no slavery that would cause these people to fight, right? It was just eye for an eye, right? If we out and about and you kill one of my people, we gonna come kill you. And it was like that to prevent any further situations that would result in an all-out war and anything like that. That's how they kept the peace. And this is also how they prevented people from partaking in other crimes of the similar, right? You had less murders happening because people weren't trying to go to war. But let's continue. In war, captives were usually killed, but some European prisoners are known to have been spared. They were spared and adopted into the family. That's why you have a lot of them who speak the same language. The Escamaco in 1577 presented the Guale with 3 Spaniards who were captured after the initial massacre of the Escamaco War. A few of the shipwrecked French who were attacked in 1577 were divided among the caciques of Guale and Escamaco. One was traded or given to tribes west of the Appalachian Mountains. Some Englishmen captured by the Stono in 1633 were divided between the Edisto and Escamaco. Prisoners were probably utilized as slaves during their detention, but there were several significant differences between this kind of captivity and the slavery, chattel slavery, enforced by Europeans. Right? Manumission was usual instead of exceptional, and it came with marriage, adoption, exchange, or death of an owner. Right? In addition, children of captives are not known to have been considered slaves throughout North America, except for some instances on the northwest coast with the Siberians. Lay that to rest right there. Amongst the Muscogee, there was no slavery. It was adoption, marriage. You are becoming one of us now. Add into the ranks. Right? There was no chattel slavery. So when you go back to the article, again, you're giving people citizenship who are originally ancestrally connected to these people. Originally. Right? Not slaves. They can't be slaves because there's no such thing. This is what America made it, right? In the times of slavery and emancipation. The reclassification took all of this, right, and spat on it. Nah, because now I'm going to tell you if you Indian or if you passing for white, or if you Indian or if you passing for black. And if you pass for black, right, if black is on that record, because we got to remember the census came out in the 1700s. If you got colored or black up there at any point, you will be a slave. Unless you bougie, you up there, you got the bag. Right, like the Robert Smalls. Right, the W.E.B. Du Bois. Right, unless you up there, the bourgeoisie, the Masons. Other than that, like, we gonna get you. You pass for black. You're a slave now. You're not one of them. We're gonna separate y'all, as a matter of fact, on the Trail of Tears. We're gonna separate y'all too. Watch this. Watch when we start walking. I'm gonna separate y'all. That's how it was. This is how all of this played out. All of it happened around the same time. That's the number one coincidence, right? It's a super duper coincidence that all of this happened at the same time. And we're gonna take this to ChatGPT real quick before we move forward. Right? Let's just ask ChatGPT, right? When was Trail of Tears? 1831 and 1850. Was slavery at its peak during this time? During the Trail of Tears era, slavery in the United States was actually near its peak in size and economic power, especially in the Deep South. Right, the Indian Removal Act and forced relocations like the Trail of Tears cleared millions of acres of fertile land in the southeast. These lands were quickly taken over by white planters for cotton plantations worked by slave Africans and African Americans. Cap that, right? Right, so right, they never talk about that though. Right, they never talk about that. They never talk about this, and this is why I like to include it. There was still native nations, right? Mixed native African Capdat communities living there. But the story is often hidden because by the 1830s, they were already under extreme pressure from centuries of colonization, warfare, and slavery. Right, they're going to tell us Edisto, PD, Chicora, Wakamwa, Santee, and others were reduced in population and enslavement. Their population was never reduced. I mean, obviously people died, but their history, their ancestry, it got erased. They didn't go on the trail. Right? Why didn't these tribes go on the trail? Thank you for answering this, ChatGPT. South Carolina's native populations were already so reduced, relocated, or reclassified that they were not subjected to a massive federal removal. They did lose land, legal status, and cultural recognition in this period. South Carolina was the slavery hub. Right, many native survivors intermarried with free or enslaved Africans. Cap that. You mean free people of color? Because that's where they all was at. They even got black slave owners in South Carolina. So again, man, we gotta understand, bro. Like, bro, it's literally, to break this stuff down is literally that easy. Like, this is deeper than what they putting in these newspapers, right? Because we can see from reading and learning alone that this stuff does not belong to anybody else but us. Right? The black folks here in America. Right? And this is a straight up fact. It's something else that I wanted to show to folks. Right? Look at how they describe the Pamunkey Indians, right? And I'm gonna bring this one back to another video I'm gonna put out when we finish talking about John Smith and his encounters with King Powhatan. Right, check this out, right? This is so interesting for them to say this, right? It says, No member of the Pamunkey tribe is of full Indian blood. All right, we know this. A lot of mixing. While the copper-colored skin and the straight, coarse hair, two different types, both types, yep, they both was there, present, of the Aboriginal Americans show decidedly in some individuals. There are others whose Indian origin would not be detected by the ordinary observer, right? They don't look like your Comic-Con Indians, your Marvel Indians, your Disney Channel Indians. They don't look like them, right? There has been a considerable intermixture of white blood in the tribe, and not a little of the Negro. Though the laws of the tribe now strictly prohibit marriage to persons of African descent. Why would they have permitted it at that time? Well, it's because if you are black, you can't go back, right? You lose. You don't win. You lose. Let's ask ChatGPT real quick. What does a sentence like this mean, right? What are they trying to say? What does this mean? Right? So it says that paragraph right there, right? Back then, white anthropologists and government agents often wrote about native communities in a way that focused on blood quantum, how pure someone was, and it downplayed African, capped at ancestry, or treated it as if it was something negative, right? The one drop rule, right? Anti-black laws, black codes, and all of that stuff, right? It ignored the intermarriage between the native African or European. They're going to put these two people in one group, but let's just call them black because they from Europe. They ignored that stuff. And like with the Pamunkey of Virginia, like many southeastern tribes, they had endured land loss, forced assimilation, and intermarriage under both choice and coercion. They were forced. Here they go. This slave trade stuff, right? That's not what it was. That's not what it was. We already learned that they was taking Pamunkeys from Virginia Indians from Virginia and sending them back to the other side, to Europe and Africa. We learned already. What does this mean? None is full blood, right? What else does this mean, right? The marriage rule mentioned was part of survival strategy under Jim Crow Virginia, where officials tried to erase tribes that had African quote-unquote ancestry by saying they were just black and not native. Right, there was a whole lot of Negro blood within these folks. A whole lot of Negro blood. What you mean? Deep chestnut, tawny, copper colored? What you mean? Look like this, thick lips, broad nose, some with the flattened foreheads. What you mean? Straight hair, some with coarse hair. What you mean? We got flavors. But one thing's for one, it ain't these niggas. He look like George Bush. It ain't these niggas. We gonna debunk that every single time. Right, and with that one, man, I rest my case with this video. I just wanted to share that with you guys, just to show y'all, like, this how much they just be playing in people's faces, right? This is how much of a joke this stuff is to these people. This is how much they don't take it serious, right? This is how much they'll play with this stuff on paper in our face all day because they know we lack the sufficient education to be able to obtain what belongs to us. Or even band together, unite, and come up out of this black mental slavery, this black barrier, break it, because it's much deeper than that. See, a lot of the answers to our struggles and our health issues and a lot of the stuff we experience today lie in the ways and customs of the people who dwelt here before. Right? These people who invaded switched up everything, even up to how our food is even processed now. Right? You don't get food from the land. It's GMO. Right, for the older folks, ask your grandparents. They could remember when they switched from using animal fats and butter to canola oil. Right? They used to get their food from the garden, from the backyard. My great grandparents had animals. We don't have that no more. We're so far, far, far away from it. You know, and all it takes is for us to come back, rewind, get together, educate, enlighten, and uplift, and we'll be on our way up out of that one. So, man, I appreciate you guys for checking out this video today, man. Like, real spill, man. Get up on your education, man. Learn a little something about your ancestry. This stuff is important because they playing with this stuff in our face. And as long as we remain oblivious, then we won't be able to properly uplift as a nation because we cannot understand exactly what we're up against. It's bigger than racism. It's bigger than racism. Right, and I rest my case again. If you haven't checked it out, go over to Amazon. Right, check out our collection, man. Check out our bookstore. Check out the recent drops we just put out. Our motivational quotes, journals, coloring books, short stories, no matter what you want, man. I have the Amazon bookstore, right? The link is in the description. It's active right now. I just want you guys to show some love, man. We trying to uplift the community, motivate, educate, inspire, all of that, man. Like, the power, it lies within us, and we just got to connect. And that's what will take us out of this poverty, right? This mental slavery. I love y'all. And until next time, holla.